Hello, good afternoon and welcome to the Midday News on Sri FM 92.7. My name is Beatrice Adu. The news is also live on Kesmi 107.1 FM and across the world at 3news.com. Coming up in the next 30 minutes. Former U.S. President Donald Trump wins second term in historic comeback to the White House. We're live in America. This afternoon, we'll explore what another Trump presidency means for Africa. Also coming up on the program, Speaker of Parliament Alban Bagbin set to address the nation on controversy surrounding the four-seat saga ahead of the House's reconvening on Thursday. And much later on the program, African Union High Representative for Silencing the Guns, Dr. Mohamed Ibn Chambers, urges Electoral Commission not to rely on quote-unquote past glory, but to prove its commitment to credibility and neutrality in the December polls. Thank you very much for joining us. Connecting to the U.S. very shortly, and we also do have Nana Yamreku Yabua, an affiliate at the Legon Center for International Affairs and Diplomacy, LESIAD. He's joining us in studio. But let me just tell you a bit more of what Donald Trump said he would do if he became president. He said no taxes on social security income, and then he said, I pledge to stop taxing social security benefits for senior citizens. I consider this as, quote, cruel double taxation, unquote, of retirees. And then end tax on tips. He said, we will pass massive tax cuts for workers. That includes no tax on tips. And like I just told you, Donald Trump has won the U.S. election and will make a historic return to the White House. But let's get the latest from there before we come to our in-studio guest, Nana Yamreku, who is here with us. Della Michelle is my colleague in the U.S. following this election for us. She joins us live now. Della, I know that Americans are waking up to a new dawn, as it were, Donald Trump's return to the White House. Just tell us really about how the country is reacting to this.
I would say, Beatrice, it's a mixed reaction as we speak right now. Many saw the trajectory as it was in 2016 and 2020. As we still speak, they are voting, they're still counting vote in other parts of the states. But again, as you've also rightly declared, the projection is in that he has won by 276 electoral votes. The mark was 270. Of course, many people are divided. Those who are celebrating, the Republicans who are celebrating, they are really happy for this massive win by Donald Trump. The Democrats and other undecided who, of course, did cast their vote for Kamala are also a bit disappointed. But really, the concern now has been on the Latinos and the black men. Even though predominantly America, the white race has a significant amount or a significant percentage, the black and Latinos have actually shifted the dynamics. So if you have carefully analyzed where Trump has won, especially in the key states, you can see that the counties in particular, so the counties are more of like the rural areas also in parts of the state. So they had the rural and the urban coming together to form the county. Now the U.S. has 1,300 counties, and you can see that he's improved, massively in some of those places. 2020, some of the counties, especially in Pennsylvania, where Biden had a good amount of votes there. You can see that this time around, Kamala underperformed in those areas. In North Carolina as well, when you're looking at places like Charlotte, where it's predominantly a Democrat area, you can see that yes, she did perform, but the gaps were closing in on there. So the concern has really been about how the Latinos came out to vote and how the black men also came out to vote. So now the conversation is moving away from the usual issues, that is the abortion rights, the immigration concerns, now narrowing down to economics. As we speak, Wall Street is actually reacting to this projection win by Donald Trump. We are seeing that Bitcoin has recorded actually a higher, should I say, has gained some momentum after the projection was made. But in all, it is what it is, as people are saying, even though many are disappointed with the results.
Even though many are disappointed with the results. And we know that Kamala Harris has not conceded yet. Do you have any information beyond what you just told us from the camp of the Democrats?
So what we are picking from the campaign team for the Democrats is that later today, this afternoon, Kamala is expected to address the country. Mind you, yesterday she did come, to Howard University, her alma mater, where she had thousands of her, supporters out there to watch this elections with her. But as the numbers kept coming in, state by state, you could tell from their faces the disappointment, So the party really ended early for them here in DC at Howard University. But Kamala is expected to speak later today, where, of course, she's going to give her final message to the people of America. But Beatrice, a lot of things are being, said right now. Some are even saying that if Biden had stepped down earlier, it would have given Kamala at least a good chance to win this election. Also, people are making reference to February 2021 after the insurrection that we saw at Capitol in January. If the case was called early, people are now arguing that Trump could have been convicted earlier to even deny him going in for presidency. But we're going to see what's going to happen at this point. We're just going to wait for Kamala also to speak. Obviously give her thank you remarks or conceding message to the people of America. Already, you mentioned Trump has already given his victory state. We're expecting more from his camp as well. J.D. Vance is also going to address, later in the day. So that's what is happening in America. People woke up, but maybe it's still dawn for others.
Indeed, it's still dawn for others. But I know yesterday you gave us the perspective of the African or the minority groups, quote unquote, there as well. And I know that based on the data we have, they also came out massively to vote for Donald Trump. Really, what do you think they are expecting another presidency of Trump to do for them?
Honestly, in the African community, the conversation has narrowed to gender. Unfortunately, that is the conversation that is taking place in the African community. The fact that people were voting because of the fact that he is a male and they're expecting him to do well in the economy compared to a woman running the state of affairs, when it comes to the economic aspects. People have spoken, tirelessly. I know that women also rose up, especially in the African, community. There were women from Sierra Leone, from Nigeria, from Gabon, from Cameroon, from Ghana that were really voting for Kamala. I mentioned earlier too that there were Black Republicans for Harris. It was also from the Black community or the African community here. It had men from Nigeria, but I also spoke to men from Nigeria who were going in from Trump because these were businessmen. So they are coming in from the business perspective, saying that, listen, when Trump was in power as a businessman, I benefited more than the last 4 years under Biden-Harris administration. So really, it has narrowed down, unfortunately, is narrowed down to gender, issues in the African community. The fact that people just voted for Trump because they felt that he is male enough to handle the things related to the economy instead of a woman. But I also know that Ghanaians have been watching closely. Usually we tend to think or perceive that whatever happens in the US is going to literally happen in our Ghanaian election. But I would say that we shouldn't get too excited because in as much as this is a victory for Trump and for the Americans, there are a lot of things that are going to affect the African community and even the African countries going forward, especially with the tariffs. Now, tariffs, the 10% tariffs that he's mentioned to propose in 2025, that is going to make cost of living really, really expensive. So I would say, It is what it is, Beatrice. It is what it is.
It is what it is. Thank you so much, Dela Michelle, joining us live from the US, bringing us the latest from there. And of course, we'll come back to you as and when there's the latest to report from there. But earlier, I was telling you that Donald Trump had addressed his supporters even before he got to that 279 electoral votes. So listen to exactly what he told them.
This was a movement like nobody's ever seen before. Frankly, this was, I believe, the greatest political movement of all time. There's never been anything like this in this country, and maybe beyond. And now it's going to reach a new level of importance because we're going to help our country heal. We're going to help our country heal. We have a country that needs help, and it needs help very badly. We're going to fix our borders. We're going to fix everything about our country. We made history for a reason tonight, and the reason is going to be just that.
It's going to be just that 47th President-elect of the United States of America, Donald Trump. And some presidents have already been congratulating him. We'll bring you more of those messages later. But Nana Yamre, like I told you, he's an affiliate at the Legon Center for International Affairs and Diplomacy. He's been in the studio with us for some time. Good afternoon to you, sir. Thank you for joining us.
And thank you for having me.
Now, several polls had predicted that, it would be a tighter race, but it turned out to be an easy win for Donald Trump after all. How did that happen?
Well, I think I had said on a couple of platforms that my indicators pointed to the fact that Trump was going to win this election by every indicator. And that Harris's burst into the scene was only for a period of moment, and we realized that that moment plateaued, and then we saw how Trump was able to overtake Harris in a number of areas. For me, I'm not surprised because empirically, time has to do with everything in politics. And when you have very little time to prepare for a solid campaign against somebody that has been on the scene for almost 8 years, you are sure to be laughing at the wrong side of your mouth. And there's a popular professor in the US called Professor Lynchman, who had predicted 10 out of 12 elections, and they had come to pass through. And he predicted that Harris was going to win this election. I beg to differ from this perspective, and now as it turned out,
you were right.
I was right, and he was wrong. And I think that all knives are going to be out in Democrat Party. They are now going to have to re-strategize and see where they went wrong. And there's going to be name calling, and people are going to be pointing fingers at Biden for what has happened.
But you talked about the fact that Kamala didn't have enough time to prepare. But if you also look at the campaign period, a lot of people felt that she was doing a better campaign than Donald Trump, who was insulting and attacking and all of that.
Well, you should understand that America hold Donald Trump to a different standard of doing politics, and they don't use the same measure. They don't use the same standard to measure Kamala Harris. So it depends on where you are taking your information from. Trump has a way of doing his politics, and he appeals to the masses. It might not be politics of insight. He usually does politics of insult.
To an extent, this time he even won the popular vote.
Yes. So that also tells you the values of Americans. It tells you a lot about what is happening, the democratic credentials. But back to the point, I think that what Trump did was to ensure that his stronghold, right, what the base of the Republican Party was cemented. Unlike Kamala Harris, we thought he was going to swing and change on the minds of undecided voters. What Kamala Harris did that gave him that popularity when she burst onto the scene was the fact that they had replaced Biden, who was considered as a very frail, feeble old man. And trust me, if Biden was up for this presidency, it would have been much more easy win for Trump. So Harris's injection of momentum, the vibe, the energy, the enthusiasm that we saw when she burst onto the scene was because she was now bringing up somebody that was considered to be aligned with the youth. And we saw Gen Zs rallying behind her. But as to whether that was enough to transform into victory, that was another issue.
Well, we've seen the results.
We have seen the results again. And people are going to blame Biden for one, not if he knew that, if he should have probably stepped down earlier. Because let me tell you something, there's a whole historical analysis that tells that America has a way of punishing first-time presidents who have decided not to go for a second term and bring their vice president. In 1952, it happened with President Harry Truman. He decided not to go and allow his vice president to represent the presidential ticket. That vice president lost, and then we saw Eisenhower come to power. In 1968, the same thing happened. President Lyndon B. Johnson decided not to go on the Democratic ticket and then wanted Hubert Humphrey, who was the vice president, to take over. They did. To their surprise, they lost the election and President Nixon came to power. So
and there was another chaos that rocked his presidency as well.
Exactly. I could give you what happened in 1972, what happened in 1986. So there is that pattern. And so for me, as a student of international politics, I knew that if we are following these indices, there is no way. And you know, everything, like I said, everything has to do with time in politics.
Everything has to do with time in politics. Forgive me, we're running out of time, but I want to ask you my last question, which is what this means for Africa and Ghana. You heard a reporter in the U.S. telling us that it may not necessarily be good news for the African Americans.
No, I have always said that America has permanent interest. In international politics, America has permanent interest, not permanent allies. So whatever U.S. wants to do in Africa, it is because it wants to secure its national interest. That is the most important thing in its foreign policy. So I don't think Africa should be ready for any significant engagement of the Trump administration with Ghana or with Africa. At least, if there is anything to go by, we have seen 4 years of Trump's presidency. 4 years of Trump presidency is there for us to assess what he is likely to do for the African continent. And I can tell you there is nothing much that is going to happen. There are other regions of the world that are more important or feature prominently in U.S. foreign policy than Africa. I can tell you there is one, there is AGOA, there is PEFA. These are all U.S. initiatives for Africa. Now they are up for negotiation. So we are going to see how Trump renegotiates these policies that are already engaging Africa. But I can tell you one thing too. Whatever Trump does in the Middle East, whatever Trump does in Europe, it has repercussions for African politics, African diplomacy, and African economies.
We'll have to end it here and perhaps continue again later. I mean, it would take some time before we settle really fully on this U.S. elections. But thank you so much, Nanayao Mreku-Yeboah, an affiliate at the Legon Center for International Affairs and Diplomacy, LESIAT. Let's bring you some more here on the news. And the Speaker of Parliament, Alban Bagbin, will address the media on recent developments within Parliament this afternoon. Now, Parliament has been engrossed, as you're aware, in a controversy following the Speaker's declaration of 4 seats as vacant. The decision changed the configuration in the chamber, with the NDC group, which hitherto was the minority, forming the majority caucus and NPP becoming the minority. But the Afutu MP, Alexander Afenyo-Markin, and leader of the NPP caucus, challenged the decision at the Supreme Court. The Apex Court has since directed Parliament to stay the Speaker's ruling until the determination of the substantive case. The House has since been sharply divided over the matter. Now, the Speaker's address this afternoon is expected to address the issue before MPs reconvene tomorrow. I'm sure you recall that there was a statement that came from Parliament that indicated that the House was reconvening from tomorrow, and that is what we are expecting the Speaker of the House to talk about even at this press conference later today. We understand around 2 p.m. We're joined by Dr. Jonathan Asante-Okyere. He's a political analyst. Good afternoon to you, Doc. Thank you for joining us.
Good afternoon, Beatrice.
Doc.
Thank you for having me.
Doc, it's been a very interesting day from U.S. to what is happening now in Ghana, with Alban Bagbin expected to address us before Parliament reconvenes tomorrow. And this is amidst, uncertainties. The Speaker will be speaking to the nation, like I just said this afternoon. How crucial for you is this ahead of this reconvening tomorrow?
Well, let me say good afternoon to you once again and to your listeners. Well, it is quite crucial that, Parliament reconvenes to ensure that outstanding issues are dealt with before the life of the 8th Parliament comes to a closure, or before we conduct the next elections, and then probably they'll reconvene in the next year. At this point, we are all at a stalemate. We don't really know what he intends to do. And if you, I don't know, okay, I said on Class FM the last time that I foresee him swerving the two political parties, and that is exactly what they did previously. Now, before Parliament, went on recess, he did not in any way suggest that the NDC was in majority or MPP is in minority and vice versa. As far as his ruling is concerned, he literally, stopped short at declaring something of that sort so that it does not become an affront as far as the Supreme Court is concerned. So what he did was to file an appeal, to stay the stay itself. The Supreme Court feels that whole thing that he wrote out there has no merit. Maybe only time will tell. But Mr. Babin, the Right Honorable Mr. Babin, who is legislative-oriented, I think that he may equally, suggest something that will probably satisfy all angles. Other than that, then the Supreme Court will have a lot, of issues to deal with, because they were not supposed to have been invited into the whole brouhaha in the first place. But because they seem to have a particular orientation, they hurriedly joined. And if you look at the steps and the procedures they adopted before they got to that particular, result, many are those who have criticized that, and it does not augur well for the image of the Supreme Court. But by and large, I don't know what exactly he's going to say today by 2 p.m. Maybe, I know very well that if he says that he's going by what the Supreme Court has said, the NDC will abide by it. If he stops short as suggesting anything of that sort, tomorrow is pregnant. I don't see how the NDC will want to give up that particular, majority that they say they have found.
Beyond
because they want to send a message to both the Supreme Court and to their colleagues in Parliament.
Indeed. Beyond what you said, others are suggesting that perhaps the Speaker may decide to keep Parliament closed until after the elections.
Well, then who suffers? That will mean that the government that will suffer. The Afenyo-Markins-led majority or minority that will suffer. And a lot of things, and of course, all of us are going to face the consequences of something of that. I am of the view that courts in themselves not being the right sources of reaching amicable solution to disputing factions. It always tends to some kind of arbitration. You judge, you lose some, I win some, compromises, negotiations. This is something that Mr. Afenyo-Markins, who declared in his victory or acceptance speech and took over the majority leadership, has stopped short of doing. He said he was going to construct, negotiate, have some compromises, and so on and so forth. What happened to that? Now you think that you are using the court because maybe the court seemed to have a certain orientation based upon having 15 Supreme Court, 13 appointed by the current president. So it means that you can easily, in a simplistic manner, say that you're going to have whatever rulings and those things. No, come and implement it. If you want to implement something of that sort, it's going to lead to chaos. That's the more reason why there should be compromises. You will win some, you lose some, I lose some. That is how to go, and this is pure politics. But if the Chief Justice, for example, does not see the reason in suggesting to all Ghanaians that Mr. Gau, the Justice Gau, at this point in time, not his profession as a judge, but in this particular case, you don't see conflict of interest, then the Chief Justice is more or less a politician than a judge.
We'll have to end it here, and we'll wait to see what the Speaker of Parliament, Alban Bagbin, would say at this press conference expected later this afternoon. Now, before we go, we're going as election season heating up. All eyes are on the Electoral Commission to ensure a fair and credible process. Speaking at a peace forum, African Union High Representative for Silencing the Guns, Dr. Mohamed Ibn Champas, urged the EC not to rely on, quote, past glory, but to prove its commitment to credibility and neutrality in the December polls, ensuring a result that all Ghanaians can accept and trust. And that's it for the news on True FM 92.7. My name is Beatrice Adu. Thank you very much for joining us today. Log on to 3news.com for more news. Coming up next is Business Daily with Michael Ogbodu. Don't go away.
Well, hello there, good afternoon, and welcome to Business Daily here on 3FM 92.7. Coming up, global renewable energy drive to hit a snag as former President Donald Trump is re-elected as President of the United States of America. We'll hear from energy strategist Dr. Yusuf Sulemana. Meanwhile, global oil prices tipped to remain relatively stable under Donald Trump's regime.
Health centers, clinics, and polyclinics. Mama, we have to vote wisely.
Well, I'm Michael Ogbodu. I'll bring you details of our top stories and more shortly. Please don't go anywhere. Well, thank you so much for your time. Straight into our top story. Energy analyst Dr. Yusuf Sulemana is warning that global progress on renewable energy could face setbacks following Donald Trump's election as U.S. president. Trump and the Republican Party, unlike the incumbent Democrats, are not strong proponents of green policies, with Trump already making statements that downplay the impact of climate change. Speaking to 3 Business, Dr. Sulemana suggested that global momentum for renewable energy could slow without the U.S. active support.
What we'd like to see is that, if you notice, when the Democrats came to power, they wholeheartedly, embraced renewable energy or green energy push. And actually, green energy push requires global leadership, and U.S. has taken that leadership, and they've done and they be able to galvanize a lot of investment, champion a lot of investment into that space. And I always say that in the world of hydrocarbon, in the energy space, renewable energy and world of hydrocarbon, they are parallel. If you have upsurge in investment into the world of hydrocarbon, that will impact renewables. And if you have upsurge into the world of renewables, that impacts hydrocarbon, because it's the same players that are acting within the space. So Trump hasn't he hasn't hidden his intention about his push to open up fracking. And fracking is what has catapulted U.S. to where it is now.
He also forecasted relative stability or even a decline in global crude prices under Trump, a strong advocate of hydrocarbons who is expected to ramp up U.S. oil production. According to Dr. Sulemana, this could benefit local consumers with lower fuel costs, but could likely impact Ghana's revenues from oil exports.
If U.S. production should ramp up, we might likely see supply glut within the space. So my expectation is that it is going to be very difficult to see oil prices going up into 2025, especially if fracking should be given a leadway, and investment should come back into the world of hydrocarbon. And bear in mind also, China demand for hydrocarbon has reduced over the couple of months, and it has not picked up yet. So if you add all this, the potential to have more supply and the weakness in demand from China, we'll have to see downward pressures on oil prices in the first quarter of 2025, especially when Trump policies begin to go back into the market. Yes, coming back to the local scene, what we'd like to see is that, assuming we should have supply glut and oil prices come down, of course, pump prices will something that will favor the consumer. But of course, Ghana is an oil exporter, and so that would mean that we might end up getting a little bit more, a little bit less with whatever we export.
So that was energy analyst Dr. Yusuf Sulemana speaking there. Still on the energy sector, as the Public Interest and Accountability Committee, PIAC, is pushing for a review of the law that governs its operations, seeking more teeth to tackle issues of petroleum revenues. Currently, PIAC's role is limited to monitoring and reporting on the use of these funds. However, the committee wants to be able to prosecute individuals and institutions that break the Petroleum Revenue Management Act. At a pre-launch briefing on the 2024 semi-annual report, new chairman of the committee, Constantine Kujeji, noted PIAC's hands are tied and can only make recommendations.
The PRMA itself says that if you fail to fulfill the provisions of the PRMA, you commit an offense. Who is to prosecute you for that offense? It is not PIAC. We have a prosecutorial authority in this country, right? So we can only recommend. And we have advocated that, look, there is the need for the PRMA to be amended to give PIAC that kind of power or authority. Sometimes what happens is that you can test it in the courts, and one of such has been tested at the Supreme Court, before. So what is recommended is that the constituent bodies, like the GBA, which has a representation and other bodies on PIAC.
So that was the new chairman of the committee, Public Interest and Accountability Committee, PIAC, Constantine Kujeji speaking there. Away from that, the Institute of Economic Affairs, IEA, has raised concerns about the Bank of Ghana's recent plans to introduce the Ghana gold coin as a means to manage liquidity and serve as a store of value alternative to the US dollar. The think tank questions the bank's rationale, arguing that the initiative sidesteps core economic issues that drive demand for dollars, including inflation, a persistently weak cedi, and the lack of confidence in the economy. This report has the details.
The Bank of Ghana's recent announcement about the
Well, we'll bring you that soundbite in our subsequent bulletins. But away from that, the government has been urged to take a more deliberate approach in fostering entrepreneurs who can drive growth, create employment, and promote exports. According to co-founder of West Lion Co, Gifty Boatema Anan, despite over 70% of all Ghanaian businesses being small and medium-sized enterprises, SMEs, their impact has been minimal due to the lack of clear pathways for their growth and sustainability. She made this call during the third edition of the annual Pan-African Conference hosted by her organization under the theme From Aspirations to Actions, African Youth at the Helm of Agenda 2026.
When you look at the country and even the continent, you realize that most of our people are entrepreneurs. But when you go a little bit deeper, you realize these are people who are called necessity, building entrepreneurs. And then we have the, development-minded entrepreneurs. Now, most of our people are pushed into this field of entrepreneurship because there are no opportunities. And so already the foundation is lacking, there are gaps, and so they are not able to expand further. That is where our government would have to come in. So number one, so that the government, puts in place certain opportunities for our people, such that people don't just finish school and they feel, I want to be an entrepreneur because there are no opportunities. But people are going in there because they have seen opportunities in there in specific areas, and they say, okay, we can capitalize on this to make Ghana great, to employ more people, and to reduce the percentage of unemployment that we have. And so for me, I would say that they are not doing enough.
So you heard the co-founder of West Lion Co, Gifty Boatema Anan, speaking there, bringing an end to Business Daily here on 3FM 92.7. For more business stories, please check out our website at 3news.com/business. I am Michael Ogbodu. Thank you for listening. As always, please stay safe. Up next is Urban Blend with Rascobi. Stay tuned.